Good morning, everybody. I think we can make a start. It's likely that other people will continue to join. I'm Brendan Donegan. I'm the UK government lead for the 2050 Calculator programme, and I'm going to start by going through some housekeeping for this meeting before passing over to our keynote speaker. I think the key point, there's a few points here. The key point is when you're not speaking, please keep your microphones on mute and your cameras off. Where you have questions about either about the meeting as a whole or about specific presentations, it would be really helpful if you could type those meetings into the chat function of MS Teams. You should be able to access the chat function of MS Teams by going to an icon at the top of MS Teams, the messages that have already been sent, as well as add your own. We will have two Q&A sessions within the meeting. The first one is after a series of presentations. The second one will be at the end after smaller group discussions that we'll be holding in virtual breakout rooms. And again, if you have any problems at any point, please do write these to us in the chat box of MS Teams. So the structure of the workshop is that we will begin with several presentations. This will begin with a keynote speech, followed by presentations by several of the teams creating calculators in their countries. Following this, we'll have a short break, and immediately after the break, you will find yourself in a different place. You will be in a breakout room. There are several topics being discussed in these breakout rooms, and the idea is to split all of the people in this meeting into a smaller number of groups, so that it's possible to have more free-flowing discussion than is possible when you have a very large number of people in a single meeting. Those sessions are designed to be as interactive as possible, and we would really welcome your participation, either in terms of questions or comments, with microphones and cameras on for the breakout sessions if possible. But for now, if everyone can keep their microphones on mute and their cameras off, that would be really great. We are recording this session. We are hoping to share the recording with some people who weren't able to join, particularly people in the Americas, for whom this meeting is in the middle of the night. It is now my great pleasure to hand over to our keynote speaker, Damita Adhikari, who is the Director of the Science and Innovation for Climate and Energy Directorate in the UK Department for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Good morning. Over to you, Damita.
Thank you very much, Brendan, for that introduction, and thank you to the organizers for inviting me to speak. I will try to give you a little bit of background of the calculators and my involvement with the calculator development. And I will also try to touch on in this Copier the role of science and innovation when it comes to net zero, and also try to leave you with some messages around the importance of the calculator at the end. So I realize that participants are from all over the world and different places, different times. So hello to all of you. My role in the calculator began some time back when I first joined the Department for Energy and Climate Change in the UK in 2012. This was a time when the new department at the time dedicated for climate change in the UK was gearing up its policies, and the chief scientific advisor for the department at the time, Professor Sir David Mackay, had written a seminal book at the time, which attracted me to the role I'm doing today, called Sustainable Energy Without Hot Air. Its data is a decade old now, but the messages are still quite valid. It's a masterpiece of conveying to the public complexities of a very complex set of policies and the challenges we face now after the net zero debate that we've had over the last 3 years, how important numbers are. David's motto at the time, I remember, was numbers, not adjectives. So it was a great privilege for me to work with him. The reason why I mentioned his name and his role is the calculator was his brainchild, and it effectively comes from the underpinning work that he did for his book. David saw the 2050 calculator at the time. This was in 2010. As a way for government to make open source policy making, which is engaging public as much as possible. When we say public, it is decision makers as well as general public. We used to do a lot of road shows around how to use the calculator at the time in the UK and how to engage people on this sort of, at the time, perhaps somewhat distant policy challenge of how to address climate change and the policies necessary for mitigation. The calculator also helped to develop something called the UK Carbon Plan in 2011. Now, that is something which we had to do under the UK's Climate Change Act of 2008. According to the Act, the government is expected to provide plans to the Parliament as to how different carbon budgets, the vehicle in the UK to achieve carbon reductions, are met. So the second one in 2011 was underpinned by quite a bit of analysis and thinking from the original calculator. It did caught up with public imagination and wider in the world as well, and the result of which is quite a large number of countries in the world now are developing or have developed similar calculators, and I hope that the influence of the calculator is as much as the same as in the UK or more. Now, sadly, David passed away in 2016 after a short illness. He was very young at the time. At the time, we were thinking how to celebrate David's contribution to public policy making, and especially the challenge of climate change. And I proposed to then Secretary of State for Energy and Climate Change, Amber Rudd, that we should revamp this 7-year-old or 6-year-old calculator at the time, which needed an upgrade, and name it after him, David. So that's how the currently live Mackay calculator was born. It took a fair while since we started upgrading the calculator, and in the meantime, quite a lot of things happened as well in terms of climate-related policy and analysis. And of course, this was just after Paris Agreement, and while we were upgrading the calculator, the debate on net zero came into the fore, and that gave us the opportunity to actually look at the capability of the original calculator and see whether we could enhance some of those capabilities. And what we did then is that we made some changes to the new version that we use today. The three primary things which are different from the original philosophy is that we've now got in the new calculator new levers to enable pathways to net zero by 2050 or earlier if we wanted to test those. It is being demand driven, and also there are some capabilities to look at what impact would be beyond 2050. Perhaps up to 2100. Of course, these are dependent on how good the data we have underlying those assumptions would be, but nevertheless, it gives a good opportunity to test what challenges we look at. It since the launch, this was launched in 2020, December 2020, after us starting in late 2016 to revamp the calculator. It was a long process. There was a reduced version of the calculator as well, which we used to call My 2050, and that was also upgraded, and that's also now available, published, and launched by our current Secretary of State for the department, the Right Honourable Kausik Hotang. So again, the upgraded calculators work has now been used widely. The US is one of the labs in the United States is also looking at how to utilize the philosophy as to how they develop a calculator or similar sort over there. And of course, quite a lot of you are involved in separate projects related to similar work. The calculator's main purpose is a public engagement tool. Of course, it is a high-level modeling environment, but at the same time, it can be quite powerful. Even though it's a public engagement tool, it has been used in the UK for policy making and taking the complex policy messages to the public. For example, the energy white paper, which we published quite recently, called Powering Our Net Zero Future, used the calculator to good effect as to how the impact of some of the decisions could play out. And we also look to take the UK's calculator, the Mackay Carbon Calculator, further to schools. The team working with us have developed quite a lot of teaching aids related to how to use the calculator, for example, to get young people engaged in objective discussions of complexities of carbon emissions. I will now move on to the importance of calculator and the science and innovation. Now, I mentioned that while we were developing the calculator, quite a lot of things happened. Of course, it was after Paris Agreement, as I said, and then on the back of that, the IPCC's 1.5 degree special report came out. And with that, there was a lot of discussions around the importance of net zero and by when, and how to get net zero, which also brought into the fore the requirement for negative emissions, for example. And throughout those period, UK has set some ambitious targets. Our nationally determined contribution under Paris Agreement is now 68%. And we have also set our carbon budget 6, the vehicle I mentioned that we use in the UK to reduce carbon emissions. That is set at 78% carbon reduction compared to 1990 levels. So it's quite steep challenges and in a very short time scale. Government's plans, the initial plans as to how we get there have been set out in the Prime Minister's 10-point plan. Some of you may have heard. That sets out some ambitious targets, for example, to install 40 gigawatts of offshore wind, 5 gigawatts of hydrogen production capacity, for example, and capturing 10 megatons of carbon. So quite ambitious, challenging targets for 2030. Now, all these things need science, breakthroughs, innovation to take the solutions to commercialization. And because of that, we have been quite keen on pushing hard for science and innovation to be a main theme at the upcoming Conference of Parties, COP26. Quite a lot of work, quite a lot of support in the UK is available for science and innovation. For example, in the 10-point plan itself, there is a innovation package called Net Zero Innovation Portfolio, which is a £1 billion investment targeting specific areas. And we also work internationally through mission innovation to work with 22 other countries, which account for about 90% of global R&D on net zero and energy. And we are following up with those countries, building on the currently announced missions to innovate, where we are certain that those technologies need further support, need further development for us to achieve our ambitious targets that we've set for ourselves. Now, to end with COP26, the ambition for COP26 is high. The objectives the COP president designate has set for ourselves are fourfold. The first one is securing global net zero by mid-century to keep the 1.5-degree target within reach, and then to find mechanisms to adaptation to protect communities and natural habitats. And of course, we need to mobilize finance if we are to do all that. And we will have to work together given the timescales we are working to deliver these challenging goals and targets. Now, none of those things will work effectively, or we will be able to make progress if we do not have public engagement. And if we can't take communities with us, if in the UK context, for example, we have made a lot of progress on carbon reductions over the last 30 years or so, but however, that has been driven by a few large investments in the power sector. And in the future, the investments need to come from consumers, for example. So the public engagement is really, really important. So our expectation is that the work that has been done on the calculators is going to be so powerful, and we can capitalize on what we've achieved so far and make use of the tools even further. I'll stop there. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, for that really great introductory keynote speech. I would like to take this opportunity to ask people to switch their microphones and cameras off if they are not speaking. And it gives me great pleasure to now hand over to Victoria Hoare from the Centre for Environmental Policy in Imperial College London, who is leading on the next part of the programme. Thank you again to Damitar.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Brendan, for that introduction, and what a fantastic opening talk to the conference. Okay, so we're just going to get a little bit of engagement from everyone now. So hopefully what you can see on the screen at the moment is a question: what role do you most associate with? And I would really encourage everyone to go to that website at the top of the page, www.menti.com. And you can do this on your laptops or any smart devices, and type in that code 17698435, and you will be asked the questions as following. So we've already got some very quick people off the bat coming on with that. At the moment, we've got a lot more business representatives, at least, who are taking part. So if you are an analyst or an academic, it's time to step up and represent. We're starting to get a few more modelers and government representatives. Got the analyst coming in. Brilliant. And I know that it's either very early in the morning if you're on this side of the pond, and very late at night, so this might not sound like the most engaging thing to do, but it's great for us to know who's come to the conference. Got a couple of members of general public, which is fantastic, and our analysts have finally overtaken those business representatives. There we go, we've got people engaging now, which is fantastic. So I'm going to leave this up for a few more moments. So hopefully what you've been given the option is to move on to the next question on your computer or your mobile device. Those analysts are really taking control now. Fantastic. Okay, so this question's still going to be available to you, but I'm going to move on to the next one. So what spatial scale of implementation do you work at? So you can either follow along with these questions as they're coming up onto the screen, or you can rush ahead on your device if you want to. So the most people in the conference at the moment are across one country, so within national borders. We've got a couple of global, got some sector specific, which is not quite a close, but it is a second. Fantastic. So I think the absolutely dominating force here is everyone is basically working within their one country, which is really interesting. And it'll be a really good take on the conference to come. Okay, I'll leave this up for a few more seconds because I think that the next question will be an interesting one to see what everyone puts. Okay. So the next question is quite interesting. So please rank in order of importance to you the following. So environmental security, energy security, food security, and human development. So your answers to this are really interesting, and it's at the moment, environmental security is in a strong lead, with energy security in that second. So I'll give you a few more minutes if you wanted to come in and change the game for that one. Well, it seems like this is the order. Energy security eking forward and back in for a few there. Okay, brilliant. So please, even if you are joining this now, you will be taken from the beginning all the way through. So, and at any point during the conference, preferably during the break and not during any presentations or breakout rooms, you can please go ahead and take part in this, because it'll be really interesting to know what our group is thinking. And on to the final one. So in 3 words, what does the 2050 calculator mean for your country? 1 or 2 words. So we've got a couple of minutes left on this before I pass back to Brendan. And it's really interesting because normally what we get is one very large word in the middle. But what is fantastic here is that there is a lot of different thoughts coming into this. So you've got net zero, which is brilliant, which is growing in popularity, which is brilliant. Sustainability, transparent evidence, policy in the middle there. There's a very joyful hope, which is brilliant. This is moving so quickly and it's fantastic. Sustainability and net zero very much taking a strong approach for most people there, which is brilliant. Public engagement, which I think is a really important one to do, because as we all know, we have our co-design and expert workshops that really help with that co-design element. Translate complexity is one there that I saw, which is fantastic. And transparency, ambition are really taking a hold as well. Innovative, brilliant. These are absolutely fantastic. And as I said, this is going to be available, this Mentimeter is going to be available throughout the entirety of the conference and for a short time after the conference if you wanted to complete it then. I don't know about anyone else, but I'm really enjoying watching this word map evolve. And we've had really good turnout in terms of participation here, which is fantastic. Public engagement really taking a strong hold in the middle there. Brilliant. That is back to you now, Brendan. I'm happy to remind people of what the Mentimeter website and code is at a later point, but I really want to say thank you for everyone for wholeheartedly participating in that. It's really beneficial to know what everyone is thinking for those questions. Back to you.
Thanks a lot, Victoria. That was really great. Before passing over to the first of our country presentations, I would like to ask again if people can turn their camera off and turn their microphone off when they are not speaking. Having said that, it is now my great pleasure to hand over to Mr. Tam and Mr. Kang from the Vietnam Calculator team for their presentation on the Vietnam Calculator. Over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon, evening to all participants. I hope you can hear me. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, excellent. So, my name is Kang. I'm from Vietnam, and today I'm so excited to attend this workshop. In particular, knowing that the participants are coming from all over the world, and we meet together under this virtual platform. So my presentation is about Vietnam 2050 calculator update tool and lesson learned. So let me control this. Okay. So in my presentation, cover the following in the presentation. So first, I'll present why we update the Vietnam 2050 calculator. Just to note that we have the first version in 2014 and already updated in 2015. So why we updated the Vietnam calculator this time? It is going to present to you. Then in the next part, I'll share with you the detail how we do it. And finally, some lesson learned from doing that. Allow me to move on to the first section. Some responsive problem. Okay. So a little bit on the energy and climate change context. In terms of climate change, the Vietnamese government announced the new NDC targets in late 2020, and it is now effective and have to be implemented. The thing is, the energy sector played a key role in meeting the GHG emission reduction target. So in the part of the energy sector, there are some challenges of doing that. First, the countries has a high growth of demand for energy, in particular electricity, grows at more than 10% per year. It slowed down this year and last year, but expected to come on track from next year. In meeting such increasing demand, the countries already faced with limited domestic resources, natural gas, oil, coal, and hydro are exploited at the maximum level, and therefore the country is increasingly reliant on the imported fuel. Fortunately, the country has good potential for renewable energy, in particular solar and wind energy. In 2019 and 2020, remarkable progress in the exploitation of solar, and this year wind has been achieved. We have now roughly 20,000 megawatt of solar and wind installed capacity, which make up around 25% of the installed capacity. So this is open an opportunity for a pathway that the energy sector can meet the national target and also contribute to a rapid energy transition in the countries. So the objective. So the objective of the upgradation are threefold. First is to evaluate the new NDC target, to check whether the targets are realistic, feasible, or ambitious enough. The second objective is to support MOIT in preparing and implementing the action plan to achieve the target. So we have the target for the energy sector, and the target have to be allocated to the subsector. The last objective of the upgradation is to turn it into an MRV tool to be able to monitor the achievement of GHG emission interventions activities. So let's move on to the detail what we do in the upgradations. Some low responsive from the computer. So first, we set the new definition of the 4 level of the model. Level 1 is BAU. So we use 2014 as the base year to determine the policies that are considered in the BAU. Level 2, level 3, and level 4 indicates an increasing level of ambitions in GHG emission reduction, with consideration of increasingly cost of implementation of emission reduction method. So in the level 2, we consider only cost-effective emission reduction method. Method 3 is consider method that have cost about 0 and lower than a certain level. And level 4 is a maximum indicates a maximum effort, so equivalent to technical potential. This slide show in a graphic form the definition of level. Again, in terms of the cost of implementation. So the graph is a marginal abatement cost curve. It's quite familiar, quite well known for determining the sort of the target for GHG emission reduction. We also disaggregate the demand sector, in particular the industries. In our original version, we have only one module for industries. So in this version, the industries is broken down into 14 demand groups, and we also have further disaggregation in other sector, in the commercial sector, agriculture sector, and transportation sector. And we also try to model as detailed as possible, and including the modeling of the production process. And when it comes to demand for the industries, we present the demand in terms of the production output, ton of cement, ton of steel, to enable modeling of available production technology and their penetration level. And for other sector, we present in terms of the useful energy for the same purpose. We also try to model the energy efficiency interventions by level. So that means that for one module, there may be more than one lever. Sorry, it's not very responsive. On the supply side, we add supply sector and add flexibility into the model by adding flexible sources, including pumped hydro storage, battery energy storage system, open cycle gas turbine, internal combustion engine, and hydropower. We also have added a new module on the hydrogen production. We also changed in the balancing approach for the power sector. So when it comes to shortage of electricity supply, the shortage will be covered by developing more gas power. Now as some key lesson learned from doing that. So first, I think this is a very key and applicable to all the team, including Vietnam. I think data is all the way a challenge. So I think the very first step is mapping data sources and their availability, and it will decide how we can define the model structure. The second lesson that we have learned is we try to model the sector as detailed as possible because it will be very helpful for the consultation and to convince the expert and policymaker to use the tool afterwards. We has already faced with a difficult situation when it comes to conducting a training to the representative from subsector, and we are not able to show them where their sector in the model, and therefore cannot convince them in the use of the tool for their own purpose. The next thing is on the one page. By one page, usually it means the length of the text in the documents. But in the case of Vietnam, we do not try to limit the text. We try to put more narrative into the one page, put the context of the sector, development policy, the energy consumption opportunity for energy efficiency improvement, and also the opportunity to make it better and allocated by 4 levels of efforts, and also the result from doing so. So this together with the high level of modeling makes the model to be more useful for consultation as well as for sort of convincing the expert and policy maker to use the model. The last thing is energy is a cost-cutting issue. So it requires a good coordinations, and therefore consultation is very key in developing successfully the model, and it requires a clear communication of the modeling approach as well as on the assumption used. This is the end of my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. Hope that I do not use more than the time allocated.
Thank you very much. I thought you kept the time really well.
Okay.
We do have a really packed agenda for the meeting, and I thought that was a fantastic presentation. And the last slide in particular, I think, would be of great interest and use to many of those participating. Without further ado, I'd now like to hand over to our next speaker, Nozarifah Ismail, who's a senior analyst in Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center, for the Malaysia presentation. Over to you.
Thank you. All right. Can you see me? Can you hear me clearly?
We can hear you but not see you.
Oh, okay. Sorry for that, but I'm trying to open on the video.
Sorry, I can see you and hear you.
All right. Thank you. Okay. Hi, Assalamualaikum, and hi everyone. So my name is Nozarifah from Malaysian Climate Change, Green Technology and Climate Change Center. So today, on behalf of the team, I will share with all of you the Malaysia's version of 2050 carbon calculator. So this is the outline of my presentation. I will share with all of you the 3 key things about Malaysia Climate Action Simulator. We call it MCAS. And next, on the development of MCAS website, the challenges and actions taken by the team to address those challenges, and lastly, on the current project status. Next, First, we have renamed our Malaysia 2050 Carbon Calculator to Malaysia Climate Action Simulator. Okay, why? Because we are looking for a name that better reflect the function of the tool, which is simulation. And second is to avoid the misconception that people always had when they heard about calculator. They thought it is actually carbon footprint calculator. And how we define MCAS. MCAS is a simulation tool which allows the user to run a series of technically possible low carbon future scenarios through 2050 to visualize national carbon emissions trajectory over time and to drive climate actions. So there are two key terms that have been addressed in this definition. First, the simulation, which actually drive actions to reduce the greenhouse gas emissions. So there are two key terms here, simulation and climate actions. Sorry, previous slide, please. Okay. Okay, so second part is we have for MCAS, we have include most of the sources of greenhouse gas emissions, not only energy sector. So we have developed this MCAS using the latest version, the McKay Carbon Calculator, where we have included all the 4 sectors: energy, industrial processes and product use, waste, agriculture, forestry and other land use. And at the same time, we also want to ensure that all the key categories under the inventory will be included in MCAS. So next. Okay, the third about MCAS is we also made several changes on the lever. We have introduced several levers, we have removed several levers, and to better reflect the current scenario or future scenario of the country. And we believe this will be an ongoing efforts to improve the tools. For example, in energy supply, we have added a lever for biomass and biogas. So in the 2100 McKay version, there's no lever for biomass and biogas. So for MCAS, we have added this new lever because we want to reflect the potential of biomass and biogas in this MCAS tool. Second, for building sector, we have added lever for insulation because the passive design of the building sector also is very important to reduce the energy demand in building sector. So immediate thing that we can do for MCAS is by adding a lever for insulation to reduce the cooling needs. And we also have added solar water heater technology, as we can see that this is one of the future potential water technology for water heating in Malaysia. And we have removed several levers on the space heat because space heat is not applicable for Malaysia. Whereas for transport sector, we have removed shipping for now because the model requires quite detailed data for shipping, which we do not have right now. So that's why we remove shipping for now. Okay, next is industry sector. We have removed refinery sub-lever. The reason is because there's no specific breakdown of the refinery under the manufacturing subsectors as reported in the National Energy Balance. Okay, next is for the waste sector. In the McKay Carbon Calculator, the waste sector is parked with the land use, under land use. But for MCAS, we have split the waste from the land use to be an independent lever, so that this is for clarity purposes. And we have also added a sub-lever for biogas capture from POME, palm oil mill effluent, because in Malaysia, industrial wastewater from POME is one of the major greenhouse gas emissions for the waste sector in Malaysia. For the land use, we have added lever for livestock and poultry. Okay, in McKay Carbon Calculator, the livestock and poultry is under the farming efficiency and yield and efficiency, sorry. But for the MCAS, we have pulled out this lever and we made it into an independent lever for users to select and explore. And then we also have added plantation yield lever and plantation area lever because the parameters for the Malaysian plantation industry are quite different from the general agriculture industry. So that's why we decided to split these two, to add it to plantation yield and plantation area. Okay, next. Another exciting part is the development of MCAS website. It is still ongoing. This is yet to be completed, but we are looking forward to have this website because this website will be a platform for users to access the measures and the toolkits. So our team is developing the measures and toolkits for MCAS for the reference for the users. And this website also we gather all the feedback from the users on MCAS, which also gives the opportunity for continuous improvement of the tool. This website also make as easy to post any updates or event announcement so that the user will be keep updated. And we also assume that this website also will be a platform, a self-service support, customer support, where the users can post any question related to MCAS without have to call the team members. Technical challenges and actions taken. I think these challenges also been addressed by Vietnam just now on the data availability. I think this also happened. This is also what we facing right now. Limited data availability on national data. General high-level energy data, I think there's no issue. We refer to national energy balance, but actually the model also require quite detail of data and parameters, which we do not have now. And even certain sectors also, there is no, the data availability is quite limited, and limited data accessibility for data parameters which are not publicly available. And as I highlighted before, we have added several levers. So this multiple modification of Excel model also quite challenging. We need to make sure that the model works at the end. We'll get the outputs that is reasonable. And these are the actions taken by the team. We use only published data. For example, we refer to the National Statistic Report, like National Energy Balance, National Greenhouse Gas Inventory. We refer to the research publications and international report like APEC, IEA, or FAO data. We also recalculate and calibrate certain data so that we can use the figure in the model. We refer to data from the ASEAN countries, and certain parameters we also follow to 100 NetK figures because we try to search, there's no figure available even in the internet. And next, we also working closely with the local technical expert to get data input on the assumptions or the scenarios in 2050, where to find the data for certain parameters that require in the model. Other than that, for the modification of the model, we work closely with Climate. When we added several levers, we want to make sure that the model works. So we work closely with Climate on the formula. And we work closely with Imperial College in terms of the web tool conversion to avoid any errors. Next. This diagram shows the overall phases for MCAS project. So currently we are in the stage, stakeholder engagement. We are still engaging the stakeholders, the ministries and agencies to verify certain data, to verify certain assumptions and scenarios. And we are working parallel with Climate to finalize the MCAS Excel model. And we also try to convert the existing Excel model to the web tool, whether is there any errors or not. So we are working with Imperial College on that. So our aim is to launch this web tool next month in October this year. So hopefully we can launch it on time. Yeah, I think that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for that great presentation. I'm going to hand straight over to the next team. I'm very happy to welcome Rangan Banerjee, Forbes Marshall Chair Professor in the Department of Energy Science and Engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay. Over to you, Rangan.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are just now. On behalf of our team, Venkat, Sarvesh, I will be making a quick presentation on the update that we are making IIT Bombay on the Indian calculator. The Indian calculator is called the India Energy Security Scenarios 2047 calculator.
You got muted. You may want
Sorry. Yeah. I'm going to quickly give you an overview. Firstly, we were asked the planning authority, the government planning authority, which is called Niti Aayog in India, has developed the initial calculator. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this was developed as an energy scenario building tool for India, and this was developed with 2012 as the base year, and it was launched in 2014. It was launched with the planning horizon was every 5 years. There were we usually planned in 5-year time intervals, and so everything was aggregated in 5-year intervals, and this is how the calculator was developed. Niti Aayog then also did at state level similar kinds of calculators. So the genesis of our request was that, can I have the next slide, please? Can I move this? Yeah, okay. So we were asked to do a few things, and we were asked to do it quickly within a few months. One was to update the base year from 2012 to 2019 and to put data for the last 3 years. We were also asked to automate some of the calculations, and the most important thing which we were asked to do was to make sure that the calculator could actually create scenarios for any in-between year. So basically, instead of 5 years, we were to do this in annual projections. When we did this, we also, apart from this, we also started looking at some of the other things which were there in the calculator, and these are some of the things that I would like to present. Can I go to the next slide, please? Sorry. Yeah, so the first challenge that we had was of data discrepancy. And what we did was we took from different national as well as IEA and other sources, we looked at the data for a particular year, 2016-17, and we found significant differences in terms of the primary energy and final energy. And then we worked at it and tried to figure out what was the reason for this, and we could identify essentially differences in the way, specifically with respect to biomass, specifically with respect to certain end users which were being accounted in different ways, and we could reconcile it within a particular area. We did this and then reconciled it so that the base year 2019-20 that we got was reconciled. The Indian government one is reconciled with the other numbers which were available. Go to the next slide, please. So we in that data reconciliation, can we have the earlier slide, that flow diagram? No. Okay, I have the control, sorry. So how do I? Okay, yeah, so this is what we did in this is we looked at collection, what are the supply, different kinds of supply data, the different end use data, and the physical quantities as well as the calorific values, and we tried to see whether there was a difference in each of these components, and then got into the calculations, and that's how we could reconcile it. Sorry, I don't think either the control is not happening, going slowly. And then we looked at also the balances in terms of import, export, and stock changes, and there also we could see where this is how we sort of did this reconciliation. Yeah. So these are the details, and I think you can see that in the slide. You can see there was a percentages. Then we worked backwards, talked to some of these people who created these balances and tried to figure out what were the differences and how were the accounting done. And we created a document to reconcile this, so that hopefully in future these reconciliation will not need to be repeated. I somehow haven't been able to master this control. Okay, I think okay. Now I'd like to just show you some of the, we wanted to do this automation and yearly projection. So basically what we looked at is when we create the scenario, we basically converted our assumptions into typically a compound annual growth rates. And for each of the levels, as we had that, we could then so for example, in the case of large hydro, we have the past. Sorry, I'm not able to control this. Can you please control this? Sorry, I'm losing out time. Yeah, can you get to the previous slide? Yeah. So basically what we did is we looked at the past trend, and then from the past trend, when you go to that point, and then we saw differences based on the projections, and then you have the 4 different levels. And this is how we sort of showed this. We take this in the growth rate, and in different, these were done using the 5 years and then interpolated. We have a growth rate so that at any year, if you take the T, you can then get what will be the availability. Go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so using this, then you have these 5-year periods, and then we can take any T, and then for that T with that growth rate, we can then get this, so that we can get these, and so we get the balance in that year, in the Tth year. Go to the next slide, please. The next issue that we had was in the calculator that we had demand and supply for electricity sector being calculated separately, and with the result that we then used to try and do some balancing or talking about surplus or capacity. So now instead of this, we started off with forecasting the final demand and taking the final demand, and based on the capacities that is required, we then built up a grid balancing mechanism. So we started off by looking at the projecting the demand curve in a 24-hour period, trying to see what would happen in terms of first using the solar and the wind that was projected, and then using the hydro to meet the peak of peaks, and then we got essentially we get like a duck curve for the future, so that we get this, and we get this for 12 representative days in each year. Can you have the next slide, please? So this was a sort of algorithm that we created on a lumped basis, and we use this algorithm to then give us the possibility of those mixes. Can we have the next slide, please? So I illustrate this. This is what it shows us, that what are the kind of requirements, the hourly demand curve, and how much is being met from the hydro, from the renewables, and then the ramping up and down of the fossil fuels. And this will also tell you, in case your capacity, the installed capacity that you have there is a problem we are using, then we need to change that capacity growth. Can we go to the next slide, please? So this gives you the sort of generation curve for a typical day, and you can see the solar during the sunshine hours and the rest of the things in other places. Next slide, please. So the other issue that happened is policymakers wanted us to give a perspective of during 2012 to 2020. If we had just looked at the scenarios that we had developed initially by IESS, how has the actuals compared with these 4 different scenarios? So using these scenarios that we did, we projected a set of different parameters and made a report. Next slide, please. And this was quite interesting to show us So for instance, if you look at the total primary energy supply, you can see those points, the curve with the points or the actual values, and you can see the 4 different levels. And you can see in different kinds installed capacity of renewables, and we can see that we are somewhere in between. In some cases, we saw that we were less than this. And of course, this of course depends on the assumptions, but it was interesting because we could see where our trajectories were, whether they were in the level 1 or level 2 or level 3 or level 4, and it also gives us insights into as we move forward. Next slide, please. Okay, so just to summarize, we have started this project. We spent about 6 months on this project. We are going to first of all release our Excel sheet, and then we will work on the web tool. After we do this, we are going to work for another year, and we are going to actually make it so that we can automate it, so that each year this updation can be done much easier. There have been several issues in terms of also the demand in many of our developing countries. When you look at projection for a long period of time, beyond the point, these demands will saturate. So we've tried to incorporate some of those in our models. We'll be happy to share more details with the other country calculators, and we'll be happy to learn from you and also share our experiences. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rangan. Especially on the last point about your encouragement of countries asking each other questions and learning from each other. With that in mind, we have one more presentation from the Nigerian team, and I'd like to encourage all of you to start thinking of questions that you would like to ask the different presenting teams, and if possible, write them in the chat function of Teams, which you should be able to access if you click on the speech bubble, which should be at the top of your MS Teams. So without further ado, over to the Nigeria team. I'd like to pass over to Mohammed Jafar Laden, Energy Analyst and Senior Scientific Officer of the Energy Commission of Nigeria. Over to you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Mohammed Laden. I work with the Energy Commission of Nigeria, and it is my pleasure once again to be part of the International Calculator Conference. Today, I will be updating you on the model development and policy integration in Nigeria. The Energy Commission of Nigeria, together with the Ministry of Environment, is responsible for producing a new Nigerian calculator. So the present Nigerian calculator project started sometime in July last year, and one of the first activities done was and subsequently the Nigerian team held a series of dives with a team from Imperial College on the various sectors in the UK Mackay model. The team then started their work on data collection and also developing draft one-pager assumption documents. On the 27th of April this year, the Nigerian calculator team held a stakeholder engagement workshop with the various experts in the Nigerian energy sector. This engagement workshop was done to finalize one-pager assumptions document and also to consult with stakeholders on data requirements in the model. The team from Imperial College were kind to provide a detailed data tracker sheet with explanations on the data requirements in the calculator model. Now, this was very helpful when it came to engaging with our stakeholders. And during the stakeholder engagement workshops, we were able to finalize the one-pager assumption documents, and we were also able to get some data and also some data assumptions that we needed for the project. The team then started work on model modification and development. Okay. First, the team identified the levers in the Mackay model that were similar to the Nigerian energy sector, and this needed to be mirrored in the Nigerian version of the calculator. The levers that were not needed in the Nigerian context were also identified, and these were to be discarded. The levers that needed to be added based on the peculiarities that we have in the Nigerian energy sector were also identified. These were not present in the existing UK Mackay model. Working with support from the consortium partners, especially the team from Imperial College, work on model modification started. This is where the deep dives we held with the Imperial College came in very handy. Now there are 6 sectors with 41 levers in the new Nigerian calculator. Some of these levers have sub-levers attached to them, and some of these have slight differences with the UK version of the model. For example, under the building sector in cooking demand, there are sub-levers for cooking with kerosene foil, cooking with foil wood, which are not present in the Mackay model. Also under the electricity sector, we introduced levers for hydro, gas, and biomass, which were not levers in the UK version of the model. Also under solar, there are sub-levers for concentrated solar power. Now all these new technologies have to be added in the calculator model. Now, sorry, back please. Now, to add new levers in the model, you need to add new rows for the technologies of such levers. While this appears simple at first, it tends to snowball, leading to addition of multiple rows in the various sheets in the model. It is very time-consuming and requires a very diligent approach. Cells and rows need to be named, linked to appropriate cells within the sheet you are working on and within other sheets in the model. The best approach we decided to take was to look at cells of similar technologies within the model, and using it as guide, we tried to mirror the linkages. Now, this entails a lot of tracing of precedence and dependence within the Excel model. Equations needed to be added and modified based on logic tree calculations. Now, this chart shows a snapshot from the Nigerian model where we were trying to trace dependence and precedence in the Excel model. This will lead to other sheets within the model and tends to get complicated. Next slide, please. Okay. Now, some of the challenges we encountered during the model development was data constraints. Some of the data required in the model was very detailed and we couldn't get it from relevant stakeholder agencies. Some data required in the model were also not available because such technologies are yet to be introduced in the Nigerian energy sector. But since we are projecting to their 2050 up to 2100, we needed to include such technologies. We also had challenges in getting feedback from some of our stakeholders. And due to this COVID pandemic, physically visiting some stakeholders was very difficult. Now, modifying the Excel model is also very tedious. There is need to document each step taken and also to stick with naming conventions for easy reference when troubleshooting problems. The team has been able to get a draft version of the Excel, and presently we are working on web tool conversion. Now, this has led to identifying some errors within the Excel model, which we are presently trying to fix. Hopefully, we expect to finish by the middle of October and hope to launch it before the end of October. Sorry, please. Okay, now the existing Nigerian calculator developed in 2015 was one of the tools used in drafting Nigeria's nationally determined contribution. Now, this updated calculator will be of strategic importance to the country. During our stakeholder engagement workshop, all our stakeholders were of the unanimous verdict that our existing national energy policy was outdated and frankly not fit for purpose right now. This is because the last approved executive national energy policy was done way back in 2005. And you can all agree with me, the energy picture has changed between 2005 and now. There is the need to have a comprehensive, all-inclusive energy policy which captures the importance of reducing the effects of climate change and reducing emissions. This policy should capture Nigeria's commitments to emissions reduction as a party to the Paris Agreements and as stated in our NDCs. Nigeria also needs to take cognizance of the fact that we need to bridge the vast gap between our energy supply and energy demand. And also Nigeria, being an oil and gas economy, needs to transition into clean and renewable energy technologies. Now, this calculator will give a lot of insight when it comes to drafting our next energy policy. It will aid in communicating with political office holders and decision policy makers who may not be experts in the energy field. This will be helpful in showing them the various pathways that we can take to transition to clean and renewable energy technologies. And this will aid in getting a new national energy policy approved. Right now, there are a number of draft energy policies in existence which are waiting executive approval. But by using this new Nigerian calculator, we will be able to best communicate with political office holders and decision makers to make them understand the various pathways available and to get a new national energy policy approved. So in conclusion, Nigeria hopes to get a completed model by the middle of October in time for a launch by the end of October. And the new Nigerian calculator will be a major tool in drafting our next national energy policy and further defining clear energy transition pathways. It will also aid us in developing and scaling new clean energy technologies. It is very important for countries to have updated energy policies to show their commitments towards emission reduction and fighting the effects of climate change. Updated energy policies will also help to ensure continuity in government policies, even with subsequent change in governments. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you very much for that presentation, and thank you for all of our presentations. We now have a question and answer session, and I'd like to hand over to my colleague Izzy Hilson to ask the first question. And I'd like to encourage you also to continue to add questions to the chat function, which you can access using the speech bubble in MS Teams. Over to you, Izzy.
Thank you, Brendan, and thank you everyone for your really interesting presentation. So yeah, please do pop any questions in the chat, and I will be asking our speakers to answer the questions that we've got so far. So I'm going to ask David's question. So perhaps someone can jump in if they have the biggest challenge that they face while developing their calculator. Perhaps I could turn to the speakers in turn. So maybe if we go to Vietnam first, what was the biggest unexpected challenge and how did you overcome it?
Is Mr. Thum over there? Hello.
Oh, yes. Okay.
Okay. Are you able?
Yeah. Good morning and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Thum. I'm the focal point person of the Ministry of Industry and Trade, and which agency to host 2050, and we are working with our teams, with the UK teams and Vietnamese team for a long time in working with the calculator 2050, and now we are in my presentation with Mr. Khanh already presented to all of you about what is upgrading the new one of the calculator in Vietnam. So for the questions of what is most challenges to when we developing the calculator in my lesson learned from the country, that I think that this is the COVID-19 outbreak in Vietnam there recently, and during our process of consultation with the stakeholders, what about the scenarios and the database of we are developed in the work tool and the structure itself. I think this is very the challenges for us by the moment, because now every agency closed and locked down the city and provinces, and cannot to face person meeting with the other stakeholder. But I think that we just lesson learned from the Mr. Khanh mentioned in the last very last presentation with him. I think that's the coordination very important to overcome these challenges. So we have a network of the focal point in the Alliance Ministry and an expert who appropriate to provide us comments and their ideas about how to see the scenario development and the levels and the one passage where we are preparing, and then we open with the consultation. So we try to connect with directly to the specific experts to get their ideas, and then our teams work together and to try to address as much as possible, and then as a result, and we are now mostly we complicated our upgraded 2050 calculator in my country. So I think that we have seen a little bit progress to complete everything in our calculator in the coming times. So I think that is the biggest challenges we have we faced during the working with upgrading our calculator 2050. So that's my sharing with all of you. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. And I've seen some more interesting questions pop into the chat. So I think I'll move on to another question, if that's all right. So we have a question for about the transition from conventional household solid fuels to cleaner fuels, and what levers are considered to be most effective to accelerate that transition. I'm not sure if one of our speakers wants to volunteer to answer that question, if they feel that their country context is most relevant.
Shall I?
Sam, I can answer that question?
Please, yeah, go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, just to share with all of you, for in Malaysia, for the residential sector, most of the energy that been used are coming from electricity, and some part of it actually from the LPG, liquefied petroleum gas for cooking. So we have added, it's not added, we have introduced a new lever on the electrification of cooking. So we want to shift from the LPG to electricity.
Great, thank you very much. I then have a question specifically for Professor Rangan Banerjee. Could you please explain a bit more about the benefits to policymakers of having a model with yearly projections instead of 5 yearly projections?
Yeah. So in the Indian context, we had earlier a planning commission and we had 5-year plans. That has been replaced now with a new body called the Niti Aayog, and we have done away with these 5-year plans. So this is a requirement for Niti Aayog to look at, they want to have annual projections. So that is one of the reasons. The other reason is that when we look at these 5-year plans, we started with 12, so 2012 to 17, 17 to 22. So suppose you want to compare for 2030, it falls in between these 5-year plan periods. So basically they wanted this flexibility. And of course, one can argue for plus or minus whether I mean, as long as you can project in some time horizon, the government, based on the way it wants to do its planning, wants to have annual projections. And that is why we want the calculator to be in consonance with that. I'd also like to just add on to the question about the cooking fuels. In the Indian context, we are looking at the cooking fuel final energy requirement. That means the end use. We are looking at the end use requirement, which we are saying is end use requirement per household, which we project, and we are projecting the number of households. We are using a lever to look at the change in the fuel mix. In our case, a lot of traditional fuels, biomass is going to get replaced by LPG. So LPG share going to 100% by a particular time period will be one of the scenarios. We can also think of other things in terms of electricity as a possibility. So we are basically looking at end use energy, efficiency, final energy, and then the energy mix.
Great, thank you very much. So I'm going to move on to a question from the Philippines calculator team from Jonathan. So the question is that agriculture is currently the priority allocation for land use, and that land is only converted for energy use under an approved energy power project. And so whether any of the speakers have any policy recommendations to help the transition from agriculture to energy for land. I'm not sure if anyone wants to volunteer.
Yeah, I think I can provide a little bit information on this, because in Vietnam we also encounter the same situation or the same issue. So what we are doing at this moment is try to promote what we call it agriculture solar PV. So on the same agriculture land, we also use for solar PV production. So this is to increase the productivity of the land, and also to improve income for the farmer, who are also suffering from sort of the disadvantageous farming conditions, and because COVID as well. So it also have the benefit on the social aspect. So I think in terms of the agriculture solar PV, we call it APV. It can first serve for self-consumption, because the farm has their own demand. The redundant or the surplus power can be fit into the grid and supplement the power for the national grid. So this is how we are looking at this issue at this moment, and at a way not to have so much influence on agricultural land, but at the same time to make additional value from the agricultural land to the farmer themselves and to the power sector. Yeah.
Can I just add one brief thing on this? We are looking at, though we are not looking at it in a disaggregated level, for any of our scenarios, we are computing the total amount of land area that is being required. And so when we have a high biomass scenario with different kinds of, if we are going to have plantations, the total amount of land would be computed. That would not quite answer the question that is being raised, but it would be at least a part of it.
Thank you very much. And so I have one final question, which is, I suppose, is not really a question, but it's Duncan in the chat is reaching out to the Nigeria team to encourage them to get in touch about any data collection issues. I suppose I had a question, which was about getting calculators used in policy making, particularly in the context of political uncertainty. And so perhaps the Malaysia team would maybe be best placed to answer it, and to talk about the challenges that they faced in getting their calculator used in policy making during the current period.
Sorry, what's the question again?
So the question was about getting calculators used in policy making, particularly in the context of political uncertainty. So I know in Malaysia you've had a recent change in government, and I just wondered how that had impacted your stakeholder engagement phase to get the calculator used in policy making.
Oh, okay. Honestly, because of the government changing, we face several challenges in terms of to engage the stakeholders. We need to brief again the ministry on the project, and somehow our plan is to engage again the ministry by early of next month to explain on the importance of the calculator and how it complements other models. Like the Ministry of Energy, they have their own model. So we want to inform them that it is not to replace the model, but it's actually to complement their model. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. And so I think I've gone through all of the questions. We'll have another question and answer session after the breakout room, so feel free to continue putting any questions in the chat, and I will try to direct them to the most relevant people. I'll pass back to Brendan now.
Thanks a lot to Izzy and all of our presenters for their responses to questions, as well as thank you to the people who've asked questions. I can see that someone has got their hand up, but I can't see who it is. Would that person like to come in? Oh, the hand appears to have gone down again. What I'd like to say then is we are now going to take a short break. This should only be 10 minutes. And what you will find when you return from your break is that you will have been put into a breakout room. This is basically a smaller meeting room where hopefully we're hoping that there will be a chance for a free-flowing interactive discussion between around about 12 people from the meeting. We'll have a discussion within these breakout rooms, and then we will come back together to share a summary of the discussions in those different rooms, which I hope that the facilitators in those rooms will be able to present in a short, snappy way, and then we'll go into a final Q&A session. So please go away and have a break now, and thank you once again for your for joining and for your participation so far. See you soon. Welcome back. I think we're gradually getting people back into the main room now, but that's a slightly gradual process. So in terms of what we do now, I think it would be great if a facilitator from each of the 6 breakout rooms could take about a minute tops to summarize some of the main points that were discussed, and then we'll move into the general Q&A session. I'm conscious that probably some of your discussions were just starting to get heated and just starting to get into gear when the breakout rooms closed. We're really keen that this conference is a a starting point for conversations between people developing calculators in different teams. So it wasn't our intention to cut your conversation short, but I suppose it serves our aim of whetting your appetite and making you curious about what the experiences of teams in different countries have been. Without further ado, then, can I hand over to the facilitator for room 1 to provide a very short summary of what was discussed in that room?
Nopakong, are you going to provide a summary, or shall I go ahead?
Yeah, maybe I can go through some of them and then you can add if I miss any points. Yeah, so our room talking about how the policies related to the calculator tool, and we have been through UK, US and Taiwan, and eventually like we are talking about the nuclear policies and other renewables policies that are decided by using the tool. Yeah. So do you have anything to add, Tim?
No, I thought there was an interesting discussion about whether there are really trade-offs around land use as well, or whether there are potentials, but rather more about synergies and the need for investment. So yes, we had a really excellent discussion.
Thank you. Over to David and Onesmus for room 2.
Yeah, likewise, we had an excellent discussion about policy, and it was fantastic to hear the various perspectives about how we can try and get the calculators more involved in policy making. So, I mean, there's probably 3 key components that came out. The first one was just recognizing the importance of technology and financial support for supporting policy development, and the importance of engaging through these partnerships to provide the resources needed to ensure that sound, credible, and very much stakeholder informed policies can be developed. And the second one that we'd like to discuss is also about behavioral change. And so we were discussing some of the ideas and some of the tips that can be used to try and encourage that behavioral change, and to consider how the calculators can be highly relevant to the climate needs of various countries. And I think what was interesting as well was that, and this came from one of our Nigeria participants, was the importance of the calculator for challenging certain assumptions. So looking at how the calculator can be used to focus more on renewable energy, and recognize that actually that's the way to go, as opposed to necessarily through cleaner coal technologies. So I think that idea about using it as a socializing tool, but one that also is really important for challenging the assumptions that the policymakers have. That was our second point. And the third one was regarding the importance of the private sector, and that whilst much of the time when we consider policymaking, it is looking at governments, is looking at multilateral institutions. But really the private sector also has a key role here, and it has a growing role, as I think we're seeing in the past couple of years as well, to inform and have those industry-led coalitions as well. So those were the 3 points. So the importance of partnerships, particularly in technology and financial support. Second, about being creative in terms of socialization. And thirdly, about the importance of the private sector in policy-making discussions.
Fantastic. Over to the facilitator for room 3.
Hi, everybody. So we discussed the challenge of collecting data, collecting and cleaning data, and we basically made a distinction between historical data or future data on the ambition levels and so on. Most of us agree that cleaning and collecting the historical data is the real challenge, because the consequences of having wrong data can be very important for the calculator. All the conclusions may be wrong. And also the granularity, the availability of the data is not easy to get, whether it's at city level, for instance, where you lack definitely a lot of data, or maybe for some industrial sectors which themselves face the challenge of collecting the data. The good choice of the base year is key here, because depending on the base year, you may have the data or not. and we have seen it for different countries. But we recognize that the challenge of cleaning the data has a value in itself beyond the other features of the calculator. Now, the time we spend on the data for future ambition levels is also very important, because if we don't work enough on this, then we miss a little bit the possibility for the calculator to explore more extreme scenarios or go a little bit out of the beaten tracks, which is also so important for policy making decisions. And the last point is that we agree that sharing the lessons learned is key. The examples from this morning from Vietnam, Malaysia, Nigeria, or India were already very, very useful for some other countries now busy with their calculator development. Thanks again for the participants of this session.
Thank you very much. Facilitator for room 4.
Yeah, hi. So yeah, I really felt like we were just getting started with our conversation. So apologies to Sarvesh for cutting you off before you had a chance to say anything. So interestingly, I think we discussed quite different things to room 3, even though we had the same prompts. So we talked a lot about the challenges of getting data, and particularly of getting it from different stakeholders, and maybe instabilities with different line ministries and things like that. How we can manage that. We talked particularly about the difficulty in getting the end use or demand side data and that not being readily available. And then we had some great advice as well, which was to try to fit the model to the data that you have at first. So build a simpler model, and then for the next phase, you can look at building on that and doing more analysis, but trying not to overcomplicate at first and seeing what you've got and then building a model that fits around that. So I thought that was a really interesting point.
Thank you very much. Facilitator for room 5.
Thanks. So for room 5, we focused on the stakeholder mapping and engagement process, and we posed 3 questions to folk in the core around their experiences and challenges with the process. Question 1, I will say at first that the room was full of folk from all parts of the world, from Malaysia to the Philippines, South Africa, the UK, Zimbabwe, Nigeria, and Malaysia again. So in terms of the questions we asked what type of stakeholders they felt were the most important to engage with and why. And we had an overwhelming sense that the full spectrum is important. So from NGOs who are more outspoken to the private sector who always have good information and insights, to government, because most sectors are run by government. That's very useful. And then regulators and academia as well. The second question we focused on was what was the most challenging part of stakeholder analysis, whether it was the mapping and identification process, or contacting or engagement. For Nigeria, they felt that contacting was probably the most difficult task. It's quite time consuming. For Malaysia, it was engagement in person is often more useful than remote. So that was challenging in COVID times. And identifying people who to speak to in the first place was also quite challenging. For Zimbabwe, a bit of everything. They're just getting started with the process, and they're finding that many industries are closed. And then with the Philippines, identification was the most challenging for them. Finally, the third question on what were the most difficult knowledge gaps that they found limiting to the process, it was understanding how to meet other ministries in the middle, because they're all doing their own planning and forecasting as well for the future. That's me.
Thanks a lot. Facilitator for room 6.
Hello, hi everybody. So similarly to group 5, we also posed 3 different questions to our group. Question number 1 was what was the benefit of stakeholder engagement? I think we agreed that it was important to get the stakeholders part of the thinking process from the very start, as opposed to just getting them involved at the very end. It was also very important so that we can maximize the use of the calculator itself. And lastly, we also said that the benefits is obviously is to get endorsement for these calculators. Over on to the second question, which stakeholder that we considered were difficult to connect with? We generally said that if it is related to the sector which has the same interest as the calculator, then it was an easy process. However, if it involves different sectors, then it can be a bit more tedious. Furthermore, we also said that if there were personnel changes in the ministry, for example, more effort was needed in order for us to recap or start the process all over again. And lastly, we did agree that government can be cross-sector involvement can be a challenge as well for stakeholders. And I guess our final question was, if given a chance, how would we do it again? I think the common theme that came up is that if we were able to do this stakeholder engagement again, more planning was needed in order to ensure that everything was on time, because a lot of processes was not expected to be as long as it should. And some also even said that we should be more aggressive, especially with government agencies, in order to push the initiative forward. So I guess that's it from Group 6. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Really interesting points there. Without further ado, over to Izzy, who will be directing questions for the final Q&A session of the workshop.
Thanks. And please do put your questions in the chat if you feel that your conversation was cut short in the breakout rooms, because we can continue to discuss those issues now. So I'm just going to go to the first question from Hershey, which is asking about linking the calculator to an economic model to understand the economic and social impact of policies and strategies. And so asking whether the calculator can be modified to incorporate this. I'm not sure if one of our panel of speakers wants to answer this, or perhaps I'll field it to a member of the consortium, so someone from Climax or Imperial.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear the question. Could you please repeat?
Of course, yeah, thanks, Rome. So the question is about linking economic models to the calculator to understand the economic and social impact of policies and strategies that will be made off the back of the calculator.
It's a very good question, and it's a question for all the countries. But the goal of this calculator is not to provide an optimization, like the cheapest path to get to a target, or what is the most expensive solution to avoid, and things like that. What the calculator will do is to take part of the economic information, especially the costs, to help you discuss what are the consequences, the cost consequences when you go in one direction or when you go in another direction. So it's a first good way to have a first feeling of what's the implication of choosing for this or that scenario. It doesn't answer the full question. But there are calculators like the EU calculators where you have additional modules which tells you what are the job creation, for instance, for a specific scenario. So you can always add different types of information at the end of the calculation, let's say, but it's always with the aim of exploring what are the consequences if you go in one direction or in another one, rather than optimizing the thing. So you may have a complementary model to look for an optimized pathway once you have pre-identified what's the range of options you have. Jen, do you want to comment on this?
Yeah, I'd just like to support exactly what you've just said there, Jerome. The calculator framework is really a sort of umbrella framework that doesn't compete with other modeling and analytical activities. It supports those modeling and analytical activities. So as you've mentioned, Jerome, for the European calculator, excuse me, we were able then to link out with two econometric models to look at the impacts of different choices, through the lever settings on, for example, international trade and leakage. So we were able then to move forward with the University of Copenhagen move forward to look at the impacts of choosing different pathways, or the EU choosing a pathway, a net zero pathway, and then the impacts in terms of leakage into other sectors outside Europe. So that I think is an important direction that the calculator framework allows you to build into. And then in terms of more of wider social implications, in the European calculator, we were also able to look at impacts, for example, on air quality by linking again there to the GAINS model from the International Institute of Applied Systems Analysis. And so I think that the point Jerome was making is that the framework that the calculators produce allows you then to connect in really very solid analytical ways to other activities to understand the impacts of a climate transition.
Great. And so Keith is asking a question about examples of when and how a calculator has been used to influence specific policies. I mean, I can have a go at answering this one. So obviously, in the case of the UK calculator, that was initially used to create the first legally binding climate target in the UK, and then the previous iteration of the International Calculator phase-funded ICF program, there were 4 countries that used their calculators to develop NDCs in 2015, and they were Colombia, India, Nigeria, and Vietnam. And then other calculators in that program also developed national energy plans and sectoral energy plans, and used their calculators for educational purposes as well. So those are a couple. I'm not sure if someone else wants to come in to pick up anything that I've missed.
I might just add that Laura kindly added in our breakout room, and also Pei Hao on Taiwan, but specifically in the UK, the development of the UK calculator identified heat as a particularly important sector that had been omitted from much of the energy policy, and so that the use of the UK calculator directly led to key policy around heat, the renewable heat incentive, and other policies.
I know that several countries here around in this conference have examples of how policies have been influenced by their calculators. I'm thinking about Vietnam, especially, also India. In the case of Belgium, I don't know whether we have people from the federal Belgian administration, but they are also using a calculator to discuss the possible pathways to reach their climate targets by 2050. And maybe I can add also an example at the European level, where we have used the calculator to discuss 2050 pathways that were different from what the EU Commission was suggesting, just to show that other levers may be envisioned. And that really helped a public debate between parliamentaries, but also within the civil society about alternative pathways. And then later on, we used the same calculator to discuss intermediary milestones, like 2030 milestones and targets. And there again, a transparent online calculator helped people debating in a very open way about, well, what are there other options than what the Commission is suggesting, which for the Commission itself was very useful. So just a couple of examples on how policies can be influenced.
Great, thank you. And I think I'm just going to have a look at the chat. Yeah, we have covered all of the questions. So I will pass back to Brendan to introduce Laura.
Sure, thank you. So yes, this draws us to the end of the workshop. Thank you again for all of your participation and involvement. I think it's been really great. I would like to now hand over to Laura Eilert to provide closing remarks, and I would also like to encourage all of you to keep in touch with us, to let us know what you thought about the workshop, either by email or by some other means, as well as to continue to discuss with us, to ask questions, perhaps using the LinkedIn group that exists, or we may find some other means to continue the conversation that we've had today. Thank you very much, and over to Laura.
Hi everyone, lovely to see and hear from so many of you today. I'd just like to thank everyone that's made today's workshop possible. So all of our delivery team for putting this event together and facilitating such an interesting discussion today. My fellow speakers from the UK government, Dr. Damitha Adhikari and Dr. Brendan Donegan, just heard from, and in particular the team from teams from Nigeria, Malaysia, Vietnam and India for sharing their experiences about the calculator. It's so great to now see all the progress you've made since you've started your projects, and to see how you've really engaged well with stakeholders and really finessed the calculator concept to your specific needs. So making those changes to the model structure to put the things that you're interested in there, the things that matter for your country. It's great to see all the progress you've made. I mean, one of the core aims of this programme is to establish a calculator community in order to promote learning between countries on how to develop and use calculators. And there really are quite a lot of countries with calculators and regions and cities now. So around we think 61 have developed a calculator. And so this is really an opportunity for us to learn together. There's more that we want to have more and more opportunities like this. The level of engagement we've seen today shows the strength of our community, especially at the working level. And it's great to understand the shared nature of your challenges, such as data collection, which I know is a very popular topic today, and the challenges there, and stakeholder engagement, as well as the shared concerns about environmental and energy security across the community. It's been brilliant to come together, even though we've had to do this virtually. I think this has worked quite well today on the technical front, and it was great to see the Mentimeter session work so well as well. On the breakout sessions, I think there were some really interesting insights on data collection. I think the difficulty getting that information from other teams and that tip to fit the model around the data you have and then make it more complicated later, I think was a really useful one. That could be definitely a way of sort of getting your minds focused on what the options are for the country, and then yes, building on that, making assumptions and documenting them to build a more complex calculator later. On stakeholder engagement, I think it's clear that COVID has caused a lot of challenges, and we should all not underestimate how time-consuming stakeholder engagement is, but how valuable as well, because getting that endorsement, getting that information, and then getting the use of the calculator by your stakeholders is so important to its success. I think on policy development, it's clear that the calculators can really challenge assumptions that people have, both experts and the general public, and that this can really promote more ambition. I thought also the discussion on land use and how it is a limited resource, land, but that there are win-win solutions to land that we should be looking for, so that there are a lot of opportunities as well and not just challenges. So obviously we're only a few months away now from COP26, which is an important moment for the world to come together to demonstrate that we're really serious about the goals we made in Paris. There's a lot of work to be done to translate the commitments made at COP26 into implementable policies and strategies. And we know how useful the calculators are as a tool to help experts and non-experts alike to better understand energy and emissions and work out what to do about them. Hopefully today's discussion has prompted some additional ideas on how to develop and use calculators in this way. And we look forward to working together with you over the next few years to make this possible. Once again, thank you for everyone for your participation, and I hope that you have a great rest of your day. Thanks.
Can I ask you all to turn on your cameras for a final photo that we're going to try to do?
Fantastic.
All right, everyone, I'm going to take the photo. Smile. 1, 2, 3. One more. 2, 3. Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much. We look forward to being in touch with all of you soon. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Goodbye.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.